Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, you got to think, if you're out in the open like this, you got the sun coming all the way over to the west, and at this time of day, you could just be in a scorching heat. We'll just start talking about your budget first. The budget is the most important piece here because you got to know what you're playing with, right? You typically pay with cash when it comes to buying land. However, there are land lenders which for 30% down, you can buy land without any utilities on it, which is a huge piece because right now we're seeing a shortage of real estate residentially, and people are looking for land. They want to go and build a home right now. So with buying, you got to figure out your budget. The budget really determines your environment. Here we've got just a grassy, slightly sloped piece of real estate, but it's drier, right? There's less trees. You've got neighbors around and it's a smaller lot. So there's a few pieces. I like to think of, what do you want? Dry, wet, treed, creeks, views, all these things have to come together. And depending on your budget, that also tells where you're gonna be. In Goldendale, you're gonna find a lot of cheaper, drier property. In Snowden, you're gonna find a lot more expensive property, but it's gonna be treed, maybe on the darker side, more of a forest. Same with Skamania County. So those are things to consider when you're getting into real estate. So when you're looking at a piece like this is more of a residential piece. You're probably not gonna find that you're gonna be maybe camping out here. And you gotta think about the restrictions in the area. You have CC&Rs, HOAs, zoning, all of that comes into play when buying a piece of dirt. And CC&Rs, in short, tell you what you can and cannot do on a property, similar to zoning. CC&Rs stand for covenants, conditions, and restrictions. And most times we see those say stuff like you have to build a home within 12 months and you can live in a trailer, or maybe you can't live in a trailer. So zoning, on the other hand, also tells us how much we can divide a lot. Can this lot be divided any other way? Those are future opportunities for people that when they go to sell that property or maybe want to earn a little bit money on the end, they might want to cut it up. So a lot of little pieces to think about because you're essentially starting from the ground up, right? We are in a residential neighborhood here, right? And normally when you're out in what I would say BFE sometimes, you don't have utilities around. This property is really easy. We've got public sewer right here, somewhere under the pavement. I actually see a blue line. See, we see a lot of paint sometimes, right? I can guarantee almost that that is likely the water, right, coming up the road here. And now we have power too. So when you want to know like, where's power? All right, look for a pole. That's pretty easy to go for. And then you can call the local power companies around in Klickitat and be like, KPUD, and figure out what's the cost to get a line over to the property. That's a really great way to estimate how much it's gonna cost. We are obviously right here in a residential neighborhood, but if we're out in the sticks somewhere, we gotta have what's called a septic system. And in some cases, there are already perk holes on the property, and a perk hole, you have to get tested and approved by the county so that we know if you can put a mini, essentially, septic system in place. And if there's one in place, that's usually pretty good. You know, you don't have to then build it yourself. It's already on the property. But I would recommend getting them tested before you purchase the property, or during your transaction, rather. If you're not in a residential area, the next thing you want to consider, aside from septic, is your water. Normally, we're going to use a well. You could use a cistern and just use that and just get water brought in to the location, but typically we use a well. And when you're doing a well, it's really smart to go out and get well logs. If there's other people living in the area, that's actually really nice because we can pull those well logs from the ecology website and find out how deep they are on average and what the average flow rate is. So then you could go to a well drilling company and get an estimate of what it might cost to drill a well. Think about like we are kind of up on a mountain here a little bit. You might not really see it, but below us, we have the Columbia River table, right? And we might have to drill 500 or so feet until we hit water. So sometimes on properties that are up in the hills a lot of ways, you might have to drill 800 feet, and that could be, you know, $20, $30, $40,000 to do that. Whereas if you're maybe on the lower elevation side of things, your wells might be cheaper. All right, so this is super cool. We don't always see these when we're out viewing property in rural areas, but this right here is a lot line. We've got another one down there off the camera, and I imagine another one up over the ridge here, but this tells us where the property boundary is. And they're scattered usually all over the property, and sometimes, like I mentioned, they're not there. They might even be a metal rod that's stuck into the ground that, quite honestly, you probably couldn't find unless you had a metal detector. If you're with an agent, we might be able to use what's like an Onyx Hunt app, which is essentially a GPS that shows us where the lot lines are. And personally, the way I advise my buyers is get a feel of the property, right? If you're on 5 acres, you can usually tell roughly with the GPS where the lot lines are. You're not always going to have the opportunity during a sale to go get the property surveyed. However, it might be worth your time and money if you're in a place that has, let's say, a fantastic view of the Columbia Gorge, and you're on the bluff somewhere and you're purchasing a very expensive piece of property. Then I might suggest to you to get a lot line survey.